we're trying to bring to the city cultural activities, and we thought that there was a very important topic that apparently was not on anybody's table, and that was the preservation of memory and of documents and records of this activity. This is a sports activity organized by clubs. It is rather a brand. There is not exactly a stable organization, as we will discuss later, and we wondered, what is going to remain after this is over? What will happen with the documents that have been generated, and what can we do to preserve it? What happened in other cases? And we talked about, because this event is 153 years old, and we don't know what happened in previous editions, and we are currently in the condition because we have the capacity, we have the professionals, and we have the ability and the means to do something that was impossible 50 years ago. So how can we preserve this history? That's why we have organized this session, and I would like to thank Fina Sola, who is really the person who has been this session is her is the result of her efforts, and I'm sure that the result of today is going to be essential and will have an impact. Let me also express my gratitude to all the participants, because we have managed to bring together people who are very knowledgeable and who will help us think about how to preserve the legacy of the America's Cup from record keeping and documentary points of view. So that's all. Let me give you the floor. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be able to moderate such a panel discussion with diverse and also highly complementary speakers. We all intend to raise awareness about how to preserve this legacy so that something remains for posterity, because very often sports events documents and records for sports events are not preserved, and therefore we will not have this information. Here we have Mr. Ignasi Armengol, president of the Barcelona Capital Náutica Foundation, Ms. Isabel Pérez, who is the manager of the Catalan Federation of Union of Catalan Sports Federations, Ms. Ana Pazo, who is the director of the Municipal Archive System of the Barcelona City Council, as well as Ms. Maria José Bádenas, who is the president of the Valencian Association of Archivists and Record Managers. At the end, we will open the floor for questions and discussion from the audience, both the persons present here and also those who are connected online. And as this is going to last for 1 hour and we have so many things to discuss, let me begin with the Q&A. My first question is addressed to Mr. Ignasi Armengol. To be clear about what we're talking about, could you please give us some hints about the organizational structure of the America's Cup Barcelona 2024, and what kind of activities are going to be taking place during this event? Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank the museum for their initiative and for having been invited to talk about archives and about America's Cup. The foundation that I'm lucky to preside over. I am actually the general manager, but I've been just had my position raised. The foundation, Barcelona Capital Náutica Foundation, has been charged with different administrations that were bidding for the celebration, for the holding of the America's Cup. Different administrations decided to come together under the FANOP, the Barcelona Foundation for Oceanic Navigation, and they decided to become the counterpart, the interlocutor of the organizer. And this is very important because it makes a difference with the Olympics or other federations, because the America's Cup has the legal consideration that is totally different, and it's also it's not like an international federation. It's not like FIA or UEFA or anything else of that sort, but rather it is an organization that is created the day after the the previous edition is created. So when Auckland finished the 36th edition of the Copa of the America's Cup, then a new entity was created, and the New Zealand team became the organizer of the next event. If another team was to win here in Barcelona, then that team, besides being the defender team, would also become the organizer for the next event, for the next edition. And that's important because it means that there isn't a set headquarter like UEFA or for instance, the International Olympic Committee in Lausanne, or you name it, because they can hold the history of this organization. Well, there's no such organization. There isn't a stable permanent organization. Rather, it is created as every event goes along, and it depends on the winner. So this is very relevant for what we have, because there isn't a documentary repository, a centralized documentary and record repository. We in Spain have never won an America's Cup, and the time we organized it in Valencia, or the time we organized it here, was because the organizer chose a place to hold it. Usually you go to the same country or to the same place of the winner. In the case of Valencia, this was organized by the Swiss. Valencia was chosen by the Swiss winner, and Barcelona has been chosen by the New Zealand winner. Then the second element that is also very important, as this is the first city that will be hosting this America's Cup here, and the fact that we are the first one in Spain, the fact that we are compiling all the information and bringing things together, makes it interesting to think about how we're going to compile the information, not only for the 37th edition, but also for this is the first edition where we will have, this is the first edition where there will be a female version of the America's Cup. There was also a youth cup in the past, but this is the first female America's Cup. For us, the big reference benchmark is the Barcelona Olympics. We know, if we're old enough, that besides the Olympic mascot, we also had the Spanish Olympic Committee was coordinated with the International Olympic Committee and with the Barcelona Olympic Committee, with the COOB, the COB. And now this is not the case. We have an organization which holds the rights. It's the rights holders of the America's Cup, the logo, the history, the use of the brand, and so on and so forth. And with the organization, they're very jealous on that. They didn't want to talk about joint organization with the hosting city, the Catalan government, the Catalan city, or the Barcelona City Council. We're just the facilitators. So we are facilitators for the organizer, which holds all the powers and competition, all the powers to organize this. And this identifies something that we had to do. And the other day we discussed this at the City Council, and we realized that one part of the documents are not public, and they are not owned and held by a public institution such as ours, but one part is being directly managed by the organizer, which is a business. It's a totally America's Cup Events Limited Barcelona. It's a private company, and we'll have to contact them because one part of the documents and records are held by them. Another part, which is the contact assigned by the two parties, the city councils, Generalitat government, and the Harbor of Barcelona and ACE, that is public, and we have it, but there's one part that they only have themselves. And then this is, well, from an administrative standpoint, we are modern foundation, everything is digital, from the very first contract to the last tender, and the answers to the questions of any company or for any tender that we are doing and has to do with the America's Cup, there is no problem. Everything is there. Everything is well digitized, and it will be made available to the different governments, and we have a formal link to the City Council of Barcelona. Will probably bring us to take this to the archives of the city, and they will have to manage this. But on this side, we hold all the information, and it will be usable. We will be able to make it serviceable. And the second part, and it's interesting for this, along with Manuel Parejo, who's here, it's interesting to talk about that, is we have here our legal advisor, is the digital rights of all the production, because and there will be plenty of that. We will have short documentaries and ads and the broadcasts and all of that. One part is hired by us, another part will not be, and we will try to see how we can preserve this, because it's not only the admin records, but all these kind of documents which are really interesting, and it's very normal that 10 years down the road people would like to see how this was done. So in everything that has to do with our foundation, this is all very well arranged, but we still need to discuss the other part, which is in the hands of the private company ACA. I would like to thank the museum because of their invitation. As a public foundation, we're really open to talk to anyone, to learn from all of you, to work jointly with all of you, and with all the different institutions, such as the City Council. We've started already with them, so that all this legacy of information can be made available and can be, safeguarded in a place that will be accessible for everybody else. Sorry, this if I was too long. Thank you very much. Thanks for the clarification, and you were really very much on time, so no need to apologize. My second question is for Isabel Perez, the Union of Catalan Sports Federations the Union for Catalan Sports Federations. Will you organize any events that are related to this, or to this America's Cup? Microphone, please. The microphone is off. We cannot hear the speaker because her microphone is off. Now, as I said, the Union of Catalan Sports Federations is the umbrella organization for all federative sports in Catalonia. There are 71 sports federations in Catalonia, and these 71 federations bring together 12,500 sports clubs from Catalonia that holds 750,000 people who hold federative license in Catalonia. Just to give you an idea of what we are and who we are. Our main participation was to channel sports projects of the local institutions, the local host of this great event, because we are convinced that international sports events are a promotion, a way to promote sports activities in the area. In this case of Barcelona, we have the experience of 1992 that transformed the sports fabric here of Barcelona, and also the sports activities here. And I'm sure that it happened, the same thing happened in Valencia. Valencia became one of the reference points worldwide for sailing. And this is something that we really need to promote. It helps internationalize our talent, which is very internationalized as well in sports elites. But we also need to talk about the grassroots sports organizations, and it helps the locals to have a closer link with this great sports event. And I am sure that this is very enriching for our sector, and it makes us grow. Specifically, we have projects that have to do with the America's Cup. We are working with the Catalan typical boat, which is called Patí Català. And we are working with schools in different districts of Barcelona, and we are also working on new technologies. We are doing, we are working on esports. We're all trying to see how we can link sports practice to the digital world, and the America's Cup is a good opportunity. We have experiences in the Catalan federations to see if we can postpone this. I don't know how this can be compiled in archives, which is the idea. But basically, in sports level, we are sure that this will be transformative. We're sure that Auckland, Bermudas, New Zealand, and Valencia, which were prior hosts of this event, they transform the way sports is perceived by society, and we want to share this. So we want to be part and parcel of this and to bring our practice closer to the citizens, because we believe that a more sportive country is also a happier country, and that's what we want to promote. Thank you so much, Isabel. She is bringing a lot of information that citizens are not familiar with. So that's really interesting. Now let's talk with the Municipal Archive of the Barcelona City Council. How do you see the precedent of the Olympics? What kind of information was generated for the 1992 Olympics, and how has that information been used further down the road? Because this will help us understand why we want to preserve information.
Bé, des de la perspectiva actual,
From the current perspective, what happened with the documents of the Olympics in Barcelona, from the current perspective, it is rather unusual. And it proves the awareness and the will that the political instances and the technical institutions, the awareness that they had, that the event was highly relevant for the city, and that beyond the celebration of that event, that could have been ephemeral, the idea that had to go down to the history of Barcelona, the imagination of all the Barcelona citizens, is what led to a number of actions that allow us to still hold all the documents on the Olympic holding and all the affiliates, as well as the organizing committee, the Barcelona Olympics Organizing Committee, the COB. In the 1990, the City Council of Barcelona agreed that all the documentation generated by the Olympic holding and the organizing committee had to be preserved in the municipal archives, and this was signed in an agreement in 1992, and then later in 2007 with the organizing committee. So there were transfers were made, and this documentation was placed in the Barcelona archives. And then we also included all of the recordings, the audiovisual material of Clara Fons, which represent all the urban changes that happened in the city throughout those years. In the case of Holsa, which is the Olympic holding, it had three affiliates: Bossa, Vila Olímpica, the Olympic Village, the Olympic Ring, and Impusa, which is the Municipal Institute of Urban Development. Here we have all the documents that have to do with the urban changes of Barcelona, the building of this whole new district of the Olympic Village, all of the construction of the Barcelona Ring Road, and all the town planning changes that took place in the city. the holdings of the Barcelona Olympics organizing committee arrived into the municipal archives in 2007, and here we were able to compile all the contracts, all the documents, all the minutes of this organization, and nowadays these are holdings that are very often checked and looked into. And as we are in this panel discussion, I would like to say that this was very innovative, and there was a great awareness of what was going on. People did not want to leave information scattered, but rather there was a clear intention to leave a solid legacy for the city of Barcelona. May I make a comment about the queries? I mentioned that there are lots of requests for access to these documents. There are many requests for access that have to do, for instance, with the Sports Institute of Barcelona. Many of them have to do with the equipment and the facilities that were built at that time. The information is used, for instance, for refurbishment and so on. The same thing goes for housing in the Vila Olímpica district. A whole new district was built at that time. And a part of the city was demolished and a whole new district was built there. And we received lots of access requests that have to do with research on, for instance, urban transformation. We also receive access requests that have to do with the government itself, internal requests of the different layers of government, for instance, on patents or brands, legal information requests, and so on. Last week, for instance, a cinema producer wanted to do a documentary, and they came and asked for information there. It's a highly diverse holding of records and documents that presents the view of a city that is about to be transformed. It's a turning point in the history of the city of Barcelona, and this is still very interesting for many people who would like to learn more about this legacy, about how things developed, and I think that there's a current perspective where this is a very valuable holding set of records in the sense that it preserves both the Holsa, so the real estate changes, the Olympics organizing committee, as well as the Cultural Olympics organization, because I didn't mention that. And there are many, many requests for access from people who are related to the world of arts and culture. As I said, we have started some conversations because we realized that the organizers of the America's Cup, and especially the foundation of the Copa, the organizers of the Copa America, the Barcelona Capital Náutica Foundation, as well as other involved institutions, and we are discussing the creation of a legal instrument so that all these records can be transferred to the municipal archive so that we can continue with this legacy that explains the city and that can continue with a good practice of the city of self-documentation and generating this set of information so that we can have this awareness of being transcendent and leaving a legacy for future generations. Can I ask a question? This is an important saving for the government, right? Because if it's the government that goes into this holdings, it is using the information that the public authorities have generated before. So that means big savings for the City Council of Barcelona, right? So this is interesting because it's a way to feed there's a feedback loop here because it allows the government to look up the information instead of having to create it or recreate it as well. Well, this is something that users should tell us. There's one part of simply economic savings, but another part is simply being rigorous about the information that we have and having comprehensive information on the topics at hand. I remember that there was recently a problem on the use of certain brands, and as we have the documents, this was made available to the users. And I understand that there has been a happy ending to that story. Okay, thank you so much, Anna. And now, let me address you, Maria Jose. We have a precedent in 2007. How was the Americans Cup in 2007? What kind of information has been preserved? Who's the steward? Who can access that information? Have there been any studies of general information and so on? First of all, thank you so much, Fina, for organizing this panel discussion, because I believe that with this excuse, we have had to do some research to see more and learn more about that sporting event that still is marked in our memories after so many years. The America's Cup was coming to Europe again after so long. It was a 32nd edition, and the Alinghi Swiss team chose Valencia. This is something that is in the mind of many Valencians. I experienced that event with great interest, and all the documents that were generated at the time. Where is that information? Where are all the records? And that's why when Fina called me up, we did a little bit of research about the creation of the Valencia 2007 consortium. As Ignacy explained very well, it's a combination of the Spanish central government, the regional government of Valencia, and the City Council of Valencia. They created a consortium. They hired people. They were public servants, not civil servants, but they were public servants, and they were given a space in the Valencian Marina, in the eldest building, where they set up the headquarters for the America's Cup. And as Anna said, the America's Cup changed the aspect of the city, because new buildings were built at the time and so on and so forth. Fina is showing some pictures, but we need to wait for a little while, because that was a surprise. In the end, we managed to find the documents, but that was like the conclusion. And in the end, we will explain a little bit more about how things went. We will tell you how we got to that point. But we're still at the introduction stage, so let me tell you more. After seeing that the municipal archive did not know much about this, and we went to the Port Authority. The Port Authority has important archives with staff, and I had plenty of hopes that they would be there, because they're just in front of where the headquarters for the Valencia's edition was there. And when I asked them, they had no information. So this shows that the focus at that time was elsewhere. People were more focused on the sports event and on the economic results. But in 2007, we did not have that feeling that records were important. Documents were important, and archives were probably not on the top of the priority list. Let's say they were not on top of mind for anybody. Probably they're not now a priority for anyone, but at least people are more knowledgeable about that fact. However, the documents were kept, the records were kept. At least that's something we can say. And it was thanks to the staff that were hired for this Valencian Consortium 2007. And we really need to thank them because they are the ones who managed to preserve this information and made it accessible to us. They said that there was digital information which is held in servers which are not easy to access, let me say that, and that there was also information on paper. And to come to the physical information, where do you think these documents were? Of course, they were in the basement. Of course, they were in the basement. That's a classic for archives. You are not going to be surprised. But that's where they were to be found. So after a long while waiting for the person who had the key for the basement, we eventually went down to the basement and then further down, and finally we eventually got there. And I was surprised because everything was more or less okay. It was in place. What you see there are projects that were submitted in this format. And I really liked the way they were kept. They were done in cardboard, and someone who was a maintenance person had very clear ideas about how things had to be kept and how to be transported and so on. And they were taking lots of measures on secondary conservative measures, and I was surprised to see the care that was used. And then we also have projects as well as the economic documents. I think that these are some shelves. The photo has capsized, let's put it that way. This should be moved to different cases, but at least the documents were there. So this gives us some hope. And when we found all the documents, I tried to explain to them that, of course, it was there, but that something had to be done. And that's when the information bomb burst. And we were told, oh, no. In November this year, November 2024, all of this is going to disappear. We are going to disappear, meaning the Valencia 2007 consortium is going to disappear, so all these documents are not going to stay there. The building is going to be vacated. The stuff and the documents as well. And well, they were already involved in their own wars on how to stay as civil servants, even if they had this special agreement and so on. And the Valencia Archivers Association are going to start diplomatic negotiations to see if these documents can be kept in some of the organizations that were part of the initial consortium. And this was all thanks to this panel discussion. So we are talking to either the Port Authority or the Valencian City Council or the Valencian government, because we want to preserve this information and to raise the profile of all of these things. We archivists make sure that things are preserved. And this is essential because if things are not preserved, then there's nothing we can do about this. But what's most essential is to have the right resources to be able to exploit the data we preserve in the archives, because otherwise archives become invisible. And I believe that projects that they have there, for instance, the projects, the tenders, and all these documents, well, is highly visible. So it probably should have some space on a website, or there should be a way to raise the profile of all this information so that it could be reachable by citizens, so that Valencia and Valencian citizens can, be happy and proud about having been the first America's Cup headquarter in Europe, and that the archives are preserved, the records are preserved. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maria Jose. And I think that we were not aware of that. We didn't know what happened to the information from Valencia 2007, and we are really interesting to see because this is a good model. Just like the Olympics can be used as a model. Well, a model of what should not be done, you mean, right? Yeah, okay, but it's a model just as well. A model of what should not be done. But in any case, it's useful to raise awareness and to make us realize that unless we really work for it, documents become and end up in a corner, and all the interest is lost. This is, of course, a sailing event, a sports event, but we need to foresee all these things. And as a sports archive representative in the in the ICA sports archives department, it's interesting that at least a little bit is being discussed already before the America's Cup, because that's what we wanted. This museum is a place where we've always had in mind how important it is to preserve our legacy, right? So we want to get involved also in records, documents, and so on, in order to create this archive. Okay.
Per suposat.
Sí, amb l'avantatge, diguem, d'haver sigut el primer, de poder
With the advantage of having been the first one and having been able to listen to everybody else, I would like to make two comments. First, the concept of legacy. The America's Cup, especially the administrations that create the foundation, that make up the foundation, they wanted to organize a great sports event, the biggest sports event in the world of sailing. They also wanted to leave a legacy, understanding that, well, in Valencia made a change, big changes in the city, especially in the harbor. They created their own harbor terminal that then remained for the city. And in the case of the America's Cup, because of time and because of will since 1992, from an ideology point of view, lots of things have changed, and we realize that these large events should not be the economic driver for countries. And in this case, there are basically no works. The basis of the teams are built within the port of Barcelona with materials that will be disassembled. They are ephemerals, so this is going to be disassembled immediately later. And this was presented as a way of recycling, reusing, and saying that we don't need to make huge investments in order to host the America's Cup. And this has always been presented as something positive. However, there was always this obsession about leaving a legacy, an immaterial legacy for the city. And there are three axes here: sustainability, grassroots sports, and innovation and technology. The three of them are shared by the museum in many examples, and we want the America's Cup to be a lever to create projects so that in 2027, 28, or 2030, these projects will still exist because they are like the aftermath of the America's Cup. So this legacy we're currently creating wants to, we have the intention of turning it into a records archival legacy as well that can be seen. And everything that we are doing at the moment, one of the projects of the legacy is a ceremony to prove that we are a country that is able to change paradigms in the world of stage and performance arts and scenography and so on. After the Barcelona 1992 Olympics, our breakthrough ceremonies became a landmark for all the rest. And in the case of the America's Cup, there wasn't a big ceremony beyond the award presentation ceremony. And in this case, there will be an inauguration ceremony as well. So from the very onset,
fins a
of
últim
the first
contacte. I és tot el que ha significat
tender
esprit
or
constructiu
call
de
for
posar
ideas, the
matèria
first call for proposals, and then all the tender as it took, as well as all the production, TV production, and so on and so forth. We want this to remain so that people can understand what happened, how it was done, and so on. But there are many other things that have to do with education, with the construction of electric marquees, and so on and so forth. So we're not only talking about competition. We're not only talking about the sporting event, as Anna said, and that a whole district was built or the ring road was built. In a previous life, I had to go and visit how the expropriation records were done. Many people um, had to access that information. Otherwise, we wouldn't have not been able to build the ring roads, and a new mechanism was invented. It worked well. It worked really, really well to do the expropriations, and these are things that we wanted to have as well in Copa America, in the America's Cup. We will not have a big legacy in terms of infrastructure, but there will be a long legacy in terms of culture. We will have, for instance, the human towers from different districts of Barcelona and towns of Catalonia, and we want this legacy to remain. Thank you so much. We would now like to open the floor for discussion. So I have received a few questions, but if you would like to ask any questions yourselves, we have time. We have a roving microphone. There's one question over there. Regarding what Mr. Armengol said, I would like to emphasize a couple of things. The fact that it is ephemeral, it makes it even more important to keep records of it. That's even more important than if the facilities were to remain. And secondly, my second comment, the complexity of the organization and the fact that the private sector is also involved and so on, as we want to then exploit the use, the legal advisors at the moment need to make it very clear what are the rights for use, because otherwise we often have audiovisual funds and all those events were done and so on, and we don't know exactly who has the rights, who holds the copyrights and the reproduction rights. So the legal rights are very important when creating this kind of funds. Any comments about this? Yes, I fully agree with what you said. Manuel Parejo is the legal advisor of the foundation and someone who has a long standing experience in the city council. Everything that we are currently doing, where there's participation of the foundation in any of the tenders, especially for production of audio visual material, communication, advertising, and so on, we always insist on holding the rights of use, and very often the rights of ownership, but we don't have that prior agreement saying that the 5 rings with Barcelona, and so with the 5 Olympic rings, Barcelona will be able to use it both, and so on and so forth. And we're still working on that. The positive thing about this is, from a legal standpoint, we are being extremely careful. We have Manel here, and I don't know if you want to make any comments, but we're being very careful about rights of use and copyrights for everything that is being done. I would simply like to say that this is a very complex event, because the generation and production of all images and all the audiovisual property had certain constraints. We are only the facilitators. The owner of the concept of America's Cup is a private entity. So these are our constraints. And the public activity around these limits is publicly owned, and therefore it will be easy to access, and it will not be time limited. Thank you so much. Further comments from the audience? Well, I have received a question through the webinar, and this question is, what is the main challenge when preserving records in sports events? Who would like to answer? Other people are basically interested in results, and this is widely covered by many others. So I guess that this is a question for me. What I believe is that the essential place to preserve is being aware of the fact that what we are producing is an important event, an event that is important for society and that is worthwhile keeping, safeguarding it. Therefore, we need to make society aware of the fact that the only way to immortalize this is by preserving the archives of what we have produced. So it's true that we cannot preserve everything, of course, but we need to select what is more transcendental. And if you do this exercise, which I find very interesting, of thinking in advance, right? Not in arrears, so that in advance you are already thinking about the needs, and that there is, for instance, classification tables and so on. So all the better, because then things will be kept and classified in the right place, and there will not be an avalanche of information, and you will not need to organize all that information in arrears. If we are clear about the kind of information we are going to produce, it will be easier to recover it later. When we're talking about the electronic administrations and about metadata, that now everyone knows what they are, of course, but at the time, no one knew. And some people said, what is metadata? Well, it's a secret source that allows us to recover documentation, because if you place this hashtags or these labels and things, you will find them more easily, as happens at home or on their domestic spaces. So two things are important. First of all, awareness about the fact that this is essential, and having a good order, putting things in order, being tidy, being very tidy.
La María José,
I fully agree with
potser afegiria, ara que ens hi hem
what
començat a
Maria
posar,
says.
diguem-ne, aquestes
Now that
publicitats,
we have
el marc
started
tenen que veure amb aquest torn,
conversations
no? I que
that
dèiem,
have to do
nosaltres tenim
with
una mirada
being
molt
tidy,
d'administració, en el sentit
we are very
no,
much
no d'administració pública, sinó
administrative,
administratiu,
because
i
we
què
are
és el que
public
ens toca ara? I
administration,
estem
and we are
pensant, diguem
very
allò,
involved in administrative
amb la visita
tasks.
d'Hisenda o amb l'auditoria, i
We are
no
thinking
tant
about
amb una
audits,
lògica
rather
d'investigador, de
than
recerca, etcètera.
about, for
Per tant,
instance,
una miqueta el
doing
que dèiem amb Anna és
research
ajudeu-nos
some years down the
a
road.
veure
So what I
com
was
més
telling Anna
podem
is, please
guardar, que
help
no
us
només
how
dins
we
d'una
can
lògica
we can
purament
place
administrativista,
things
que és la
in order,
de la Fundació.
so that
Però
we
com
don't
ja tenim la
only
voluntat de
follow
que això
our
es
own
presi com anem fent,
administrative
doncs
procedures.
es tracta
As
una miqueta,
the
diguem,
will is
d'ajudar-nos,
there,
diguem,
the
a
idea
ordenar-ho de
is
tal manera
to
que
help each
puguem
other, so that we
també
can
és un
put
element
information in
sí
order in a way that is easy to access later.
hem vist tot
And then when I've seen
el
all
prestatge,
those
que
piles and
avui la
shelves,
digitalització amb una administració
nowadays
com la nostra ens
digitalization in
ajuda,
an administration such as ours is helpful.
No, però on vull anar a parar és que és veritat que nosaltres mateixos, des
It
d'un
is
punt de
true that
vista
we
d'arxiu propi, estem jugant amb
have
dos
an
nivells
archive,
i això
and
ens
we are
permetrà
playing at two different
no
levels,
esperar,
and
ho ha
this
comentat
will
l'Anna, ho has
help
comentat
us.
tu, que l'any que ve tanquen el consorci, o l'Anna ha comentat que té, diguem,
Because, for instance, if next
organitzacions
year this
societàries
consortium closes
mercantils que fins
down,
i
and
tot
if there
tancaran, volen
are
traslladar
some
perquè
commercial
estaven en negatiu
organizations
perquè ho
that did
consideraven
not
propi,
transfer
en el nostre cas,
their
el que ja ens hem
holdings,
dit
their
és,
records
escolta, fem el
until they
conveni,
closed
i l'Anna
down,
mateix
well,
havia gravat que ja
in
es
our
pugui
case, we already
disposar en un
signed an
arxiu central,
agreement so that
malgrat encara
all
ho
this
tinguem posat,
information
perquè tenim
could be
avui este
sent
camí,
to a
però
central
anem a
archive,
buscar
even
la
if we
manera
have
que
to
pugui
preserve
ser
it ourselves.
compatible,
But
perquè
let's
això sí
make
que
it
és veritat que ens
compatible and
ajuda amb la
accessible, and this is very
digitalització,
helpful.
a
And
no
for
haver
this,
d'esperar que es tanqui
digitalization
la
is very
Fundació d'aquí
important,
10
because we
anys,
don't need to wait
o, diguem, es
until this
desconfiguri.
foundation
Però
is close to 20 years down the road.
Molt més tu que jo, d'això.
No, no, però...
You are much
perquè
more
és que,
knowledgeable than
bueno, ho
myself,
he passat
so
un poc
please.
ràpidament en la meva intervenció, però
I mentioned this
efectivament, ja en
as
el
my
2007 hi
passing,
havia
but in
documentació
2007 there was
electrònica, o sigui,
already
n'hi ha una part
electronic
que sí que estava
documents.
electrònica.
There
Esa
were
part no la
electronic
vaig poder
documents, so one
veure,
part
per exemple.
of the documents
Per
were
què?
digitized,
Pues
and
perquè
I was
l'accés a
not
aquest
able to
servidor
see
on
that
estava
because the access to the
guardada,
server that preserved that
ninguna de les
information,
persones que tenia allí
nobody
tenien accés.
there had access to
Aleshores,
that server.
clar,
So
tenim una cosa positiva, sí, no ocuparà
there's
espai
one
i tal.
positive thing, it
Bueno,
won't take up any
val.
space and so
Però
on, but then what
aleshores invertim
happens?
també allò
Let's
que calga
invest
en que
what it
l'obsolescència
takes
programada de totes
so
aquestes
that programmed
plataformes i tal,
obsolescence of different
pues
platforms and so on
no ens
cannot
dona
eat up
un cop.
our
No, vols dir
efforts.
que l'Anna no ens ho assegura?
What happens? Wouldn't Anna
Perquè-
make
Sí, sí,
sure
sí,
that we
nosaltres
will be
venem
able
la
to access that
eternitat,
information?
entenc.
Yes, we're selling eternity. Don't
No hi ha
worry,
problema sobre
we're
això.
selling
No,
eternity. There's no problem about that.
en relació a la pregunta,
Regarding
jo
the
destacaria
question,
algunes qüestions.
I would like to emphasize some questions.
Gràcies.
But Anna, but Fina,
crec
please
que,
remind me of the question.
Un dels elements claus és la proactivitat.
One
no?
of
És a
the
dir,
key
com tu
elements is being
com tu has dit,
proactive. As you well
ningú
said,
vindrà d'ofici a dir-te és que
nobody will
organitzaré
come
una cosa tan
and say,
important
I'm
que
going to organize such
m'encantaria
an
que això
important
anés a
thing that
l'arxiu,
I'm
no?
sure that this will
Bueno,
be
pot
deserve
passar, però
to
no és
end up in the
l'habitual. Llavors, jo
archive.
crec
Well,
que hi
it
ha
could
d'haver una
happen, but it's not the
proactivitat
usual thing.
i
So,
aquesta
so you need
taula
to be
rodona
proactive,
forma part.
and this panel discussion is part of this proactive drive of professionals who are aware of the fact that mechanisms need to be created so that these records and documents can be transferred so that we can guarantee this legacy. So there needs to be a proactive drive, and we also need to find a good interlocutor, which is not always easy in complex layers of government. In our case, this was very quick, but as you well explained, the organization or the organizers of the America's Cup, they have an organization that is totally different from the Olympic Games or other sports events. So we need to find who the right interlocutor is. Then we need to create the necessary legal instruments and to sign agreements that establish the rights and obligations of the different parties, and that will allow for the transferring of the funds. And finally, economic resources. They need to be also stated in these agreements because we often find that it's fantastic. We will transfer the records. Okay, fine. And here we have Nuria Postico, who's in charge of the Contemporary Archive, but we often see that the volume of documents is huge and it's very difficult to deal with such an amount of information. How do you process such an amount of information? So that takes resources, human and both human and economics and resources, and these need to be well established. And regarding digital transfers, it is not easy, probably. We're now used to managing digital information produced by the administration within our own systems, but transfers of electronic records that do not come from the administration need to be made. And therefore, we need to create the necessary procedures with guarantees that this will last and will be accessible in the future so that these transfers are correct. And that's what we will do. And I'm sure we will do a good job. You must also think that in order to organize sports events, there's usually a subsidy system, and very often the subsidy system could also entail a commitment to safeguard the information. Because when public authorities offer subsidies to organize an event, okay, there should be a commitment by the receiving party that that information is going to be preserved, so that we don't go crazy trying to find information, as has happened in some cases. I'm really sorry for the joke that I made, but maybe because I don't want to take up the space for professionals, but I believe that documents do exist. The event creates documents, records, professionals that are involved in the organization of the event is there. So this change of mindset of having an organization that is fully focused to organizing this sports event, and that also has in mind the idea of transferring all the information that is generated by the event itself. And I think that we sometimes in the field of sports are not very aware of that. For many, many years, the sports sector has not had good access to data, and maybe you could help us find a solution on that. Maybe it'll be easier to transfer all those things that are being produced in our events. It'll be interesting to understand the scope of the documents that we need to keep in mind so that you want to preserve. The sports information is already we keep it in mind, but if you help us and if you teach us the kind of information you want to have preserved, that will be really interesting. Let me see. The ICASPO, the International Council on Archives section on sports events, drafted some guidelines to sports events, and it was done jointly by the Generalitat and with the Girona City, the Girona Regional Council, and there are these guidelines on the kind of information that is generated, the type of electronic documentation that is generated, and so on. And this was done between the SPO and the Catalan government in order to offer these guidelines to international events. And then the International Olympic Committee, the ICO, has a handbook on how to organize clubs and sports associations and so on. So you have two sets of guidelines, and they are complementary. They're basically the same style because we're all more or less working along the same lines. And the one done by the Generalitat de Catalunya is done in Catalan, Spanish, English, and it's being translated into French because the official languages of the ICA are English, French, and Spanish. Okay, thanks for telling me, because we will be able to introduce this in our ordinary dealings. Thank you very much for telling me. I think it's time to wrap up. Time is short. I know that there are many pending questions. There are some people who have asked for the floor, but we really have to close at 5, and we don't want to overrun our schedule. We have seen how complex to organize maritime sports events such as the America's Cup is. The activities that are carried out, and the president of the Olympics, of the Barcelona Olympics, that should be a benchmark, or at least a baseline to build from. And we also have the president of the Valencia 2007 America's Cup. So what comes next is to get all hands on deck and start working. I was talking recently to the directors of the Vendée Globe Archives manager. This Vendée Globe is another sailing event. It started in 1989, and there were private companies that dealt with it, and now they are in the process of identifying the producers so that they can identify this information. They opened a project, and in November, December, they will tell us more about how things are evolving, and they want to become the benchmark of, well, the go-to institution for Vendée Globe information. But I'm not going to tell you more, because in December they will be here to explain all of this in a webinar, in a seminar, and it's important to hear from the horse's mouth. Let's hope that as we are in sailing and maritime things, let's hope that this panel discussion can become a beacon to raise awareness of the need to preserve information about the America's Cup in Barcelona 24, this big event that will take place in Barcelona this year. And this is the way to go. We at the ICA, SPO, and in many other institutions are really involved in keeping the information about these sports events. I would like to conclude by thanking all the four speakers, the audience, both those who are here and those who are connected online. Thanks to the Maritime Museum of Barcelona for organizing this panel discussion, as well as their staff, who were instrumental to make this a reality, the International Council on Archives, as well as Irene Arenas and Veronica Reuter, who have been extremely supportive in the organization of this event. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon.